UK Cinema History, Caravaggio, 1986, directed by Derek Jarman. Hello and welcome to UK Cinema History. Today we're going to be talking about 1986's Caravaggio, directed by Derek Jarman. This is our second attempt to do this. We did this back in October when the film was on BFI along with all of Derek Jarman's works, difficulties. And because we had an extra Thursday in this month, we decided it was going to be a good time to redo that episode. So we're going to be using this to replace the old episode. And we're also joined by New York Times and USA Today best-selling author Hi Bender. Welcome, Hi. Hey, Hi. Where could people reach you if they wanted to use your services as a writer or to learn more about you?
Thank you, Eric. I love your photo, by the way. Um, my on Clubhouse, you can click my profile and get that information. If you're not on Clubhouse, my website is bookproposal.net. And I also have a second site, hi, onYourScript.com. I'm a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author and ghostwriter who's sold over 1 million books. And I provide help for people looking to do books, book proposals, movie scripts, TV scripts. So if you have any interest, please feel encouraged to reach out. Also, please follow me on Twitter. My handle on Twitter is HyBender, one word, HYBENDER. Currently have over 74,000 followers, and it's a fun time. I post fresh material every morning. And Eric, I don't normally do this, but I have to tell you, usually we're in this bubble about UK cinema history, but world history is being made right now. I just have to mention, in about 10 minutes, probably Donald Trump is going to be a convicted felon. So the jury has said that they've reached a verdict. So that means there's no hung jury. Experts have agreed that it's almost impossible that they would acquit him on all 34 felony counts. So he's probably been found guilty on at least one count. We won't know they're filling out some forms now, so we won't know right away, but the jury will probably start reporting on this in like next 15 minutes or so. So I'm just saying, when all that information happens, I'll mention it here because we're living in a moment of history. Sila, great to see you.
Hello, Hi, hello, Eric, hello, Kathy, and MD. I only see an MD. Sorry, I'm a couple of minutes late, but I'm away with my son, so I'm a little bit occupied otherwise.
No, that's fine. We were just getting warmed up, and of course, Hi was announcing the news that the Donald Trump verdict is about to come in. And yes, Hi. No matter where we are in the conversation, please just interrupt us when that comes across your screen. I am going to put the link up to where we put our recordings of these up as a podcast on Apple, but it's and also available on Spotify up at the top. We will be getting Yazzie later in this episode, but she's just running a little bit behind. Sula, this is a familiar film to you because, of course, we did this episode once before, but unfortunately, we had some internet problems, and when I went to go post it on Spotify for the podcast, 90% of it was unusable and garbled. I was kind of looking for a week where we had an open week, and it turned out this was the one. But we're going to go in PTR order and just kind of get your hi. Was this your first? Was this your first viewing of the film and your opening thoughts? And of course, we all love the fact that you usually can find some behind the scenes information on the making of these films.
I'd actually like to go last if that's possible. This was my first viewing of it.
Perfectly fine.
Okay, thank you.
Sila, I guess we're going to give you the opening word. This would have been your second viewing of Caravaggio, and your thoughts, and also anything you gained or noticed from your initial viewing back in October.
Well, I have said this a couple of times before, and I must repeat it. The possibility of watching one film once, in my experience, has little to do with watching it 3 or 4 times. I mean, this film is, I feel like I was watching a slightly different film because I was able to capture in the film and outside of the film a lot of thoughts or things that make me think much higher of the film. I wanted to go to a note that for me embodies the whole thing, what is in my mind about this work. I think I have seen another film of his. If I remember correctly, that was one that has to do with just blue, his paintings. So I don't know anything other than this from him on this level. But this particular film I find to be, as I wrote down, hell and paradise are one. The joy of being in the gutter, surrounded by poetry, and uttering poetry from hand, eye, and mouth. Basically, the...
I'm sorry, Celia, could I just interrupt for a second?
Yes.
Because I promised to do this before you came in. Donald Trump has been found guilty on 34 of the 34 felony counts. The jury found him guilty on every one of the 34 counts.
Well, I need to take a pause on that one. First, to open a bottle of wine and a bottle of champagne and a six. I need to pause on that one.
And just like that, the curse of Caravaggio has lifted.
We lifted the curse after all these many years. It only took 400 and some odd years to lift the curse. Congratulations to all of us. And congratulations to the American judicial system.
On the, let me get this right. I remember where I was working. I was working as a chef for a small bar in New York City when the votes came in. And I have a picture, I have to look it up. I will not show it here, but it shows what I looked like in 2015 at the end. It is not cute. It is not pretty. I was devastated when I heard the news. So I am very excited right now.
Well, history has been made. I think I'll leave this in the podcast. I don't think I'll edit it out when we go to send this out to Apple and Spotify, because I think this is going to be kind of one of those Watergate moments where where were you? Well, I can tell you where I was. I was in this room with doing what I love with the people that I love.
That is very good. Yes, but if I may suggest that I mean, now everybody knows. I, it doesn't matter on which side you are. Everybody knows what happened now. So I would suggest, just a humble suggestion, that we stay away from the topic here, because he doesn't
Oh yeah,
deserve that much attention.
I just promised before you came in that,
No, but I'm happy you did.
but I agree with you.
Well, then I will just.
And
Do you want me to continue or close the?
and yes, I was about to say that, Silas. Let's get back to Caravaggio.
So I wanted to repeat what I said because I didn't know about I didn't know about this news that you were waiting for. So I was caught off guard. I came a little bit too late, but I just wanted to repeat this, which I wrote spontaneously. So I'm not sure if I can portray it the way I meant it. The joy of being in the gutter, surrounded by poetry, and uttering poetry from hand, eye, and mouth. And what I mean with that, or what I captured, what I'm trying to say there from this, not from the film, but from the whole. Yeah, now I'm a little bit. My nerves are hitting me because of the film and because of the news. That I see these figures and the activity that is going on, even the mother or grandmother giving philosophical advice in a very soft spoken way, even the interjections of the cardinal, I think it is. Everything was telling me of a somewhat perverse state of life in this place, but not in a negative sense, because on one side they are enjoying all kinds of things, sex, irrelevant of gender, they're enjoying food, they're enjoying pepper, or they're hearing about the beauty or the wonder of peppercorns, and they're just enjoying life even though they're actually filthy, they're actually somehow in a way in the gutter in terms of filthiness. Um, they have ways of expressing luxury, luxurious activities, but somehow it's always this rolling around in the hay. So I found this combination very interesting. How you see a very heightened level of joy, of pleasure, but combined with being in the gutter. And I'm not sure if I can portray or convey that in the way I mean it when I use the term gutter, but you probably know what I'm talking about. So that was for me a very complete sense that I got from the whole film with its elements.
Thank you, Sila. I'd like to welcome our co-founder, Yazzie Sophie, to the stage. Yazzie, your thoughts on your what is this, your third viewing now of Caravaggio?
Yeah, as I said, again, this time, all this, the way that it's not a straightforward biography, the symbolism, it's a very poetic biography. The just like, and the way that uh, Jarman combined his life and the status of an artist. I mean, he saw himself in Caravaggio still uh, uh, to on my third view was very deep and very touching, and really this time more than the first time. Actually, I saw that more this time, and I remember that this movie was actually the start of these rooms. We brought Stila in, which was a very like a huge gift to the rooms and to our conversations. And that, that was Derek Jarman's mission. He wanted to make movies that talks to people throughout generations, and the love for art, the different viewing, the separation of art and artists, the effect that the art can have for generations if we put the artist aside, and just see how the power of art, to tell us the reality of history, not just the history that is written in the books, that the reality that happened, that view, and the way that I'm pretty sure that we're going to talk about it again, this anachronistic aspect of the film, which he uses very subtle and very beautiful, and he picked Caravaggio, who is a very, still to this day, a very controversial artist and figure, and his relationship with his models, lovers, prostitutes, and all that. uh, I found that theme very strong in this film. That clash between sacred and profane. Um, mm, that that still to this day, actually very much so today, affects the artistic freedom. The constraint that it brings to the work of art. Uh, I found that, like, it was like a prophecy to the art today. And the visual style, how he combined this, correct me if I'm wrong, like um, uh, Bristain, yeah, Gabriel Bristain, cinematography. Yeah, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong. So the way that he brought that chiaroscuro, that light and dark, that style of Caravaggio's painting, and that those mirror scenes, those the way that he uses that Renaissance, that Baroque aspect of those paintings into contemporary cinema, into avant-garde cinema. That avant-garde approach was this time was very compelling, because I said, like, this movie for us was the beginning. So when we started watching these movies, yeah, I thought that comparing to other movies that we watched, this one is still my number one, I can say, among all the movies that we saw. Then comes If, and The Sporting Life, and all that. So, and the actings, the Tilda Swinton as, like, her debut movie, her performance, the way that she embraced her role, that raw energy that the role needed, she performed. She embraced that. She totally brought that to this film. That, and Nigel Terry, Sean Bean, all of them. This is a very intense movie. Every character is very complex. Uh, they all brought it, and what else? Although I told you, like, I can't remember if the last time we talked about that the very that com- you know when we say it, it might sound like very contradictory, but the neorealism and the surrealism, the way that he combined these two, is very fascinating. And the integration of all the styles with he added this very Lacanian Freudian aspect, dreamlike and sexual aspect, that nightmarish quality to the film. It I think it depicts that anxiety of the artist, that complexity of his artist, that all the conflict, everything that he had throughout his life. Um, and but still, most importantly, the way that uh, Jarman saw himself as a marginalized, uh, you know, mm, independent artist that is not understood the way that he wanted. That social commentary, and that political statement, as we can say, and he saw that into an artist from the 16th century and brought it to life, brought it back to life. I think that's very uh, interesting and something to reflect on, very thought provoking. The legacy, if we see, the legacy of Caravaggio to an LGBTQ filmmaker in the 80s. I think that's that's the most important aspect of this film. And it's not, say it out loud, he's not like rubbing it to our faces. It's very subtle, it's very poetic, it's artistically done. And that's why it's very precious. He didn't make a movie about a marginalized LGBTQ filmmaker. He picked a very renowned, well-known Baroque painter, and he told his story through that painter's life. And I think that bridge that he took, the bridge that he made between past and present to illustrate like his challenges as a modern artist. And it says that, yeah, art echoes throughout generations. I think it's, that exploring that, it's very for a this is what avant-garde cinema should be like.
Thank you, Yazzie. And our good friend Kathy Edge has rejoined our panel today. We're really glad to see you, Kathy. Have you had a chance to see Caravaggio? And if so, what were your thoughts?
I have. But this is. I'm very interested in Jarman more than anything else. I think Yassi's comments are absolutely right. He is one of the most important avant-garde or just artists, especially in the UK. It's the perfect meet. I mean, if I was teaching a film studies class and you wanted to see something about the artist and the film mirroring each other, this is the one I would recommend. I'm reminded, and I've put in the chat about John Berger's Way of Seeing series. For those that haven't seen it, I strongly recommend it if you're interested in art.
There's also a podcast version of it, by the way, on
Is there
Spotify.
really?
Yes.
Oh, I did not know that.
It's not as much fun without the pictures, though.
No.
But at least you can. But you at least you can. What I did was because I was on a long car drive as I went back and kind of Googled that because but it is available on podcast as well.
Thank you. I will add that to my list later. Caravaggio's art is it's just perfect. To sum up an artist, this movie is perfection. It's brutal. It's raw. It's not exactly not linear, but it delves into other senses and other ways of seeing again, and different perceptions of the world around him, and the tortured and not terribly likable kind of protagonist, I think, is Jarman, because he was a difficult man, but he lived his art and he was true to that, and he made no apologies for it, and that's to be admired in my world. But yeah, I would, the clip I've put in the chat is about how children saw Caravaggio, and it's very, very valuable in terms of the ambiguity about gender and how you put your own experience into it. But I'm so chuffed to see a discussion about Caravaggio. It's amazing, and Derek Jarman in general. He's a very well, not underrated. For those that like Jarman, it's 100%. But there's a lot of people that don't know much about him because of his gay activism. But yeah, my normal incoherent ramblings, I'm afraid. But I'm glad to be up here. I'm glad to be back. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Kathy. Hi, did you want to go now? I generally like to have you go before I do, just in case I step on any of your background information, and I want to make sure that we're not stepping on each other's notes.
No, I would like to go last. And Alyssa, nice to see you in the room.
That's fine. Well. I'm going to start with a quote from Derek Jarman that relates to what Sela saw in the film. He said, people tend to think that history is immutable, that there is something called reality. Reality is what interests me. That image of reality in Caravaggio. Why is a Ken Loach film more real than a Ken Russell film? And why is an Italian neorealist film more real than Michael Powell? For me, the answer is that they aren't. I actually see the news on television as fiction. People say reality, but what they forget is that the streets they walk through come out of people's imagination and are not real in that sense. And what Sela was talking about when he was talking about the combination of high art and the gutter in this, and the use of Caravaggian techniques to combine that sacred and profane, has a lot to do with what he was speaking about in terms of the Italian neorealist movement. And as a matter of fact, the story for this and several rewrites were done by one of the great scriptwriters for the Italian neorealist movement, Susie Cecchi D'Amico, who, beginning with Vittoria de Sica back with the Bicycle Thieves, all the way through the films of Visconti, Pasolini, Vittoria de. I'm sorry, I already mentioned Roberto Rossellini. She even co-wrote Rome Open City, and all of his most famous works. And even the Mario Monticelli films of the late realism era, such as the comedy Big Deal on Madonna Street, and my personal favorite, The Organizer, the 1966 film with Marcello Mastroianni as a union organizer, and she came out of that neorealist tradition. And to me, what Jarman was able to accomplish with this film is exactly that combination of the sacred and the profane. And Caravaggio, as an artist, symbolized that by the simple addition of people with dirty feet and anachronism. And so these two things in terms of the objects, combined with the chiaroscuro effect that he basically invented and then was perfected by the Dutch masters later, are what Jarman also brings to the filmmaking. So you see dirty, bare feet all the way through this film, just as you do in a Caravaggio painting. And one of the great things that I hadn't even thought of until this viewing that this film had done for me is that now when I view a Caravaggio painting, I appreciate it on a different level, because I'm not thinking in terms of the biblical story that he is attempting to tell anymore. I see it as a piece of meta because of this behind the scenes look at how an artist's mind works. I'm seeing the prostitute dressed as Mary, Mother of God, and that Caravaggio is not painting Mary, Mother of God for the masses. He is literally portraying his models as that. And the use of anachronism is used here the exact same way that Caravaggio used it. In terms of, it was a way of saying to people of that era, you too can live the life of a saint. So that's why Caravaggio dressed all of his figures in modern clothing, and that is why you see things like the cardinal with the pocket calculator. You see the Ranuccio working on his motorcycle. You hear a radio at the bar. You see the electric lights, and these are all the little elements and what Jarman is saying, just as Caravaggio was saying, that the sacredness is not something of our past; it is current. He is saying the same thing about the life and meaning of an artist. But it is also interesting that, as Yazzie pointed out, and Kathy backed up, that he chose one of the least likable artists in history, because of course Caravaggio was a man with a rap sheet. Literally 150,000 pages of arrest records still exist to this day of scrapes that Caravaggio had gotten into, stabbings. And when you read the descriptions, he dressed in black. He traveled by night. He would get into violent outbreaks. Always, it seemed, near a public house. The majority of his models were street musicians, such as in The Musicians, which is just wonderfully reproduced in this, or prostitutes, such as Tilda Swinton's Lena character. And Yazzie and I were talking about different theories as to, because we know so little about what actually happened in terms of the events that are portrayed in this film. An alternative version might be, and this is, something that his biographer Begoni, who you see in the film, he's the man in the typewriter, who was also his great rival as a painter, suggested, which was that, as well as being a painter, he was running a prostitution operation with these models, and that he was acting as his pimp. Because if you look at the time and place of these violent outbreaks, they don't seem to be among random people. They seem to always take place in public houses or near bordellos. And this idea of him dressing in black, going out at night, perhaps he was just protecting his women in his double role as both pimp and painter, which nothing in the plot of this film supersedes, but that is another explanation as to why he may have stabbed Renuncio. There are several. The legend was that he had refused to pay Renuncio after a bet on a tennis game, because one version of the events took place at a tennis court in a duel. I mean, there are all sorts of things, but the one I like is the idea, because we do know that Renuncio was actually a pimp, that this was two rival pimps fighting over their most valuable prostitute, or sex worker in modern day parlance. And what I think Jarman does brilliantly is he never puts us on the side of Caravaggio. So the voiceover narrations, which are supposed to be from him dying of presumably lead poisoning or sepsis from his injuries, don't get us into his head at all. They're rambling. Some of them are highly sexualized. Some of them are perverse memories. Some of them seem like they're going to be philosophical, and they trail off. At no point are you supposed to take Caravaggio as being this person who is a great thinker. You are supposed to judge him merely on the greatness of his work, which I think this film admirably shows. And then the last thing I want to talk about is something Cassie hinted at, which is something that is not talked about enough when it's talking about the career of Derek Jarman, who unfortunately after this was diagnosed with HIV and then would die of AIDS in 1994. And the lesions had actually infected his virus or his irises, and to the point where he could only see the color blue. And so, of course, his last film, as Sheila pointed out, was called Blue, which was just a blue screen with him reflecting on what it was to suffer with AIDS. And he gets talked a lot about for that. He was actually the very first rather public figure to come forward in England with the fact that he had HIV. And these are things that get talked about, but his ability as not only as an avant-garde filmmaker, but as a technical innovator doesn't get talked about enough, because Caravaggio was the very first film, so this would be in 1986, edited on a video deck. So it was shot using Super 8 film. Every bit of that film was then transferred to video, so it didn't have to be printed. And what that allowed for was him to just make markings and only print the sections that he wanted edited. And then he could use a computer and something called Paintbox to go back over it, do your color corrections. And the other great artist who also happened to start just like Jarman, who began in the 1980s using this technique, although he was using a Super 16, was, of course, Peter Greenaway. And this is a technical innovation which is now taken for granted. This is how almost all film films today are edited, and it all really began with these two very low budget films. This one and the Draftman's contract from Peter Greenaway, and it really does change the look of the film, because by using this transfer technology, by using the smaller format and then blowing it up to both first to video and then to the 35 millimeter film, the blacks become extremely black, but they don't bleach out the on normal film color does because if you underlight a scene in color, unlike black and white, you don't get those crisp shadows. But by flattening these surfaces out, but it also requires a lot of foreknowledge that this is the technique that you're going to be using when you set up your sets, when you set up your set design. You can't have a lot of stuff on the sets. You have to use very minimal sets in order to do this, which both Greenaway did with Draftman's contract, and the minimal sets in Caravaggio speak for themselves, and also the lensing that you're using, because you're using such a small format, you can't use those nice wide angle lenses and go in for those nice beautiful meaty close-ups. Everything's got to be shot at a bit of a distance, and so it's the angling of where you put those lenses. So you have the high overhead shots, and you have people entering and exiting the room. You're basically following them from the top of their heads. Or you'll have, and the only director that I can think of that uses this technique now is Catherine Bigelow in the United States. These telescopic lens pans, such as when he's going from Jerusalem to hand him something, and how incredibly smooth that looks, and that is because of his use of this format. But then it's also become almost universally adapted, because now in the digital age, is almost everything is filmed digitally, and they're using this type of lensing, this type of editing, and Derek Jarman was an innovator with that, which is not enough to recommend the film, but it is when you look at the results, because of course every shot of this film, I think, you could make a table book of, and it would be a masterpiece. And so yeah, those are my opening thoughts on the film. I do have a lot more to say about the use of anachronism, and then Yazzie had some points on Freudian psychology in the film. To sum it up, what I think makes this film great is that it is avant-garde, and yet it also remains very accessible, and of course, as Kathy pointed out, the most accessible of Jarman's films. And now I'm going to turn to New York Times and USA Today best-selling author Hy Bender.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for those wonderful insights. Thank you to everyone on stage for your insights. I'm going to say up front, you're all more insightful about this film than I am, but I'm going to try and offer some outside the box perspectives. First of all, Eric, I'm especially glad you mentioned Caravaggio's long rap sheet as a felon, because with apologies to my promise to Sela, it really ties in nicely
I
to
know,
this
I know.
moment in
It's
history.
perfect.
And just as an addendum, Trump is scheduled to be sentenced on July 11th, which is a Thursday, and we are scheduled to do The Wicker Man on that day. So that might be another historic show. So that
Another cursed movie that we can break
That's
the curse of.
amazing. This is so good.
thank you for forgiving me to break my promise.
That's going to be the original Wicker Man, right? We're not talking Nicolas Cage here, are we?
The Beast. Yes, of course it is going to be 1974 Edward Woodward. Yes, of course, of course. I'm sorry to
Oh,
interrupt, Ty.
beautiful.
Yes, go ahead. My apologies. And you just filled us with such mirth that we just couldn't help rejoicing.
That's fine. Joy is always good. And as for the anachronism, yeah, I agree, Eric, with everything you said. Very much so. It's it's like an excuse that Caravaggio used anachronism, so you can use anachronism in this movie about him. But and that's valid. But it goes beyond that, as Eric said. Um, it emphasizes that there's a connection between the past and the present. And I would go a step further. I mean, as you know, what just happened is evidence of. Uh, but also, I would say it's a statement, maybe twofold. One is um, that he wants us to feel connected to the past, and that what's happened then is also about us. And but also that it's about him, because Jarman is an artist as well as a filmmaker, and the way he shows Caravaggio contemplating, uh, how the process is that he poses these models and he looks at them and he changes them. That's what a film director does. Is you have these visuals that you and actors that you play around with and adjust and try to get the visuals right. And so I think he's also saying on some level, I'm doing a movie about me on some level. And so I think the quote unquote anachronisms uh, do a lot of multi-layered work. Um, Also, it's always fun to create clashes. So, past and present, there's an energy there. Just as Yazi mentioned the sacred and the profane. there's an energy to that, and light and darkness. So the more contrasts you can have, the more potential energy you're packing into a film. And as for Tilda Swinton, I watched. She's of course amazing in this. Um, I know less about Jarman than anybody here, but um, uh, John Waters did a film festival where he was asked to pick 5 films, and one of the things he picked was Blue. And yeah, as Eric mentioned, it's a film that the image for the entire film is just is blue, a light blue screen, and the movie is basically the soundtrack. And so that was one of of John Waters' picks, and he said he originally saw it in the East Village and in New York, and there were signs all over the movie theater saying, "There's nothing but blue. You're not going to see anything but blue," because apparently people paid money to see the movie, and they and then they were furious that there's nothing but blue on the screen. So we put out like notices all over the place that yeah, that's it's blue. But when he went to see it, it was packed. So there is an audience. There's an audience for these things, but it's also important to know, that you want to match your audience to the art. And that's I was going to say about Tilda Swinton, because I mentioned John Waters. The interview was mentioned Tilda, and he suggested that Tilda Swinton to Jarman was like divine to John Waters. This this star that he worked with once he discovered this person, worked with that star as much as possible. But going back to the audience thing, and this is why I wanted to go last, because I want to talk about outside of it. So I mean, basically, everyone who's talked has loved this movie, and I'm not going to go counter to that, but I want to talk. I want to go beyond that bubble, and just talk about how films are perceived, because I make it. What I want to talk about is more than reactions to this film, but reactions to film in general. Um, Robert Fripp wrote, "What we hear is the quality of our listening." And I think what he means by that is um, we hear as much as we allow ourselves to hear, uh, to, that at whatever level we are at to listen. And so the quality of what we hear is uh, gauged by, excuse me, by our ability to hear. And I think that's wise, but I think it also doesn't go far enough. I think I would enhance that by saying it also has to do with the values that we're bringing to it. What we perceive is shaped very much by our own values and perceptions. And so we've been talking about this movie, for anyone who hasn't seen the movie, for all they know, we're talking about like Star Wars or Raiders of the Lost Ark in terms of, I mean, that like if you just went by what people are saying, you'd think this is an extremely popular film. But as Eric knows, because this made Eric so mad, he swore off IMDb. In IMDb, this movie is rated 6.5 out of 10. And just for context, Blue, which is nothing but a blue screen, is rated 7.3 on IMDb. So people's reactions to a particular film are going to be very much uh, adjusted by what they're bringing to it. And I hope you don't mind my saying, last week I brought in one of my favorite films, and Yasi said it was a B movie, and Eric said it was uh, done by second-rate talents. And I would say, from my perspective, that's what you were bringing to it. And we just had different values we were bringing to it. So, in my estimation, that film is much greater than what you were saying and perceiving it to be. By the same token, the people who are giving this a 6.5 aren't seeing the film that everyone on the stage is seeing. And on some level, that's okay. But I just think it's something to be aware of. And just to make it more concrete, at the time it was released, the Washington Post film reviewer, uh, Paul Atanasio, he wrote this about the film. I may be a dull fellow, but from the very beginning of Caravaggio, I hadn't the slightest idea as to what Jarman was up to. He mentions the anachronism, which is that's just a totally dumb comment. Anachronisms are fine. What's most puzzling is Jarman's view of Caravaggio himself. Throughout, the artist talks in voiceover, a jumble bizarrely composed of overheated, posy, homoerotic dreams, and the kind of, quote, insights, unquote, that might inspire a sophomore at Bennington to scribble in the paperback margin. Does Jarman want us to hoot at Caravaggio in the same way the artist himself sneers at his similarly orotund patron, the cardinal? Are we supposed to marvel that such a great art flowed from such a silly soul? At any rate, you spend less time wondering what Jarman is saying than wondering when Caravaggio is going to end. So that's just brutal. Oh, I said also says um, there isn't. This is where he just totally loses credibility. There isn't a shot in the movie that makes you sit up and take notice. His clodishness makes you see Caravaggio less as a tribute than some odd and oddly irritating effort at assassination. So that's from the Washington Post, not a little rag. So it is possible to see this, and New York Times was more favorable, but very mixed review as well. This is an astonishing thing from the Times. In one, because I thought this was one of the best sequences in the film. In one elaborate and overly extended scene, gold coins pass from Caravaggio's mouth to Ranacchio's to Lina's, thereby, thereby establishing an, an unsanitary sexual connection. I mean, that's what a way of viewing that scene. I think one of the very best in the film. And this was more positive than negative review. So, these are not stupid people. The New York Times reviewer was Walter Goodman. These are not stupid people. They're bringing values and ways of evaluating to films, and those ways of valuing things are steady, and the films change, and they may not always be using the same tools. I would put it this way. And I think that's a lesson for all of us, that when you're seeing something that's different from what you're used to watching, maybe consider changing the tools that you're using to evaluate it, because maybe different tools, just as you would use different like types of lenses to see something, maybe you want to use different tools of judgment to evaluate different types of films. So I think it's, I think this is, uh, oh, and one other thing I wanted to mention. In the original show that you did on Caravaggio, Sela said that this reminded him of like a theater festival piece, that it felt like theater pieces. And I want to echo that. It's not exclusively that, but I think that is a, very much a part of it. And I'm saying that as someone who has seen and reviewed literally hundreds of Fringe Festival shows when New York had an international Fringe Festival every year. And I was actually one of the best known people there. People would like run after me to ask me to come see their show and review it. So yeah, I agree. And also, one of my favorite things about the Fringe was this incident that the person who ran it reported. There was this teenager who was with her very wealthy parents, and he was saying, "Look, let's just go and take on a show on 42nd Street. We can afford to go to any show. Why do we have to go to these things?" And she said, "I don't want to go to Broadway. I want to see something cool." And I totally understand what she's saying. There was an energy, a rawness, and of like anything can happen. This is not following the rule book. These are not going by uh, uh, a set structure. In a Fringe show, anything can happen, and there's a tremendous energy and vitality to that. Of course, it means that a show can go so badly, and I've literally said this. I've seen shows at the festival that changed my understanding of how bad art can be, how awful a human being is capable of creating. That I didn't know that humans were capable of making things as horrendous as 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 they were until I started watching hundreds of Fringe Festival shows. So that's the flip side. Anything can happen in both directions. But at the same time, you can see something you never would have seen otherwise. And I think that's the power, at least part of the power, what Jarman um, is doing something really unique that hadn't been done before, and giving people a way of seeing and experiencing and feeling that hadn't been done. And that's important. That's, pioneering and brave. Um, because you're braving reviews like the two I just mentioned from the two greatest newspapers in America, um, but you're also getting people who appreciate you. Um, I know the guy who was high up in, I think, BBC4, fought for his films to being made. And one of the last interviews with him, when he knew he was not going to be living a lot longer, was with that person on BBC. So you're going to find your champions too, but it's a hard path to trod, and you got to admire and give credit to anybody who does that. So, so those are my kind of out of the box comments. I wanted to go last because it's not so much about the film as about the doing something different, the courage, and the challenges and the risks involved in doing that, and how we as people who talk about film have some obligation to adjust our lenses when we deal with films that maybe don't immediately align with what we normally look for in films.
I just
Thank you,
wanted
Hi.
to I just wanted to ask a quick question because you referred to a Robert Fripp for a quote, and I just wanted to hear if that's the Robert Fripp guitarist or another Robert Fripp.
I don't know. I was looking for quotes about listening.
Ah,
Not
so
for
it
this,
might be him.
actually.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I was looking for.
Yeah,
Uh,
it is him because it's from the notes from oh, what is it, the rock opera thing that, or the concept album that they
Okay.
did.
Yeah, yeah. All right, that's all.
sure. Thank you for asking.
Thank you for that because I think that's really not only pertaining to us, or meaning mostly you, discussing films, but I really find that as a as a grand act of being a human and creating what some might call art, it's very important to not just look at the individual work, but at the greater scheme.
Well, that brings me to a very good point because, of course, I talked about the technical innovation in terms of the editing, in terms of the visuals, in terms of the use of the Super 8, and then and those type of things. But another innovation I thought for this film was the use of sound effects and music, and of course the score is credited to Simon Fisher Turner, but almost all of the music is didactic in some way, shape, or form. And what I think Jarman does here is something that you always seem to call for, Sila, in film, is allow us to hear things like the scraping of a paintbrush against an easel, and the movement of cartwheels on a pavement, and the type of sound recording that was done, because this was shot inside a studio, and so all of those sounds were put in afterwards without being able to have music to kind of cover up the studio ness, I guess you could say, of the sound, is very innovative, and something I don't think I noticed when I used to watch this on an old tube television coming out of one speaker. But what's very interesting to me, and I didn't notice until this time, this was completely recorded in mono. This is all in one channel, and yet it has a very deep sound. And I was wondering, Sela, as someone who's got a much more sensitive ear than I do, on this second viewing, if that was something that you noticed too, how just very deep the sound is on this film.
I would have to agree with that. Perhaps not as precisely as you perceived it, because I think you were going a lot more from the cinematographic experience and knowledge. And I would say that my connection to that is a little bit simpler. But yes, and I think that goes with the whole concept of what I have called chamber works, which is what Hai was referring to also, that the whole piece, you have the impression that you are a theater. You are in a theater watching a theater play. You're in front of it, and everything is not just in front of you or on top of you, but everything is raw. So the sound, not only the music that is played and which type of music is played and in which part is played, but everything about it has some rawness to it.
And raw is a very good word. Now I'm going to turn to Kathy, who is our resident plebeian on the panel. Just kidding, Kathy. But yeah, you're the one who called yourself that, and asked about your kind of reaction to not to the sacred elements of this film, but to the profane elements of this film. And this was a cast of mostly well-educated English actors portraying Italian peasants, basically uneducated peasantry, using localized British accents. And how do you think they did in terms of portraying that strata of society? Or as somebody who is more attuned to the British English accent, was it more of just a muddle? What was there a noticeable difference between the Pope and one of the sex workers in terms of the performances?
Oh yeah, that's a really interesting point. Actually, I'd not thought about that before. I'm not a fan of people putting on accents. Just do your own voice. That's the best thing. But certainly, I mean, what's his name? Ranucci, Sean Bean's character. That's
Renuncio.
Ranucci. So, thank you. Um, that kind of that actor has a very working class Yorkshire accent, and I don't think he's ever changed it. Not he maybe pushed it up a little bit in Bond, but yeah, I thought that was good. I thought that was good because there's a when you hear accents unconsciously for a British person, you hear classes, you hear where people are in the social strata. So yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That's a terrific spot. Thank you. I might rewatch it again tonight.
Uh, that's another point I'd like to make, just for people who might be listening either on Facebook or on Spotify or Apple. This was a harder film now to watch than it was back when we had it, because back then Criterion had all the Derek Jarman films on, and it's rotated out, and so it may be some time before it rotates back in, at least here in the States. I was able to get it on my BFI, but Hi, who lives in New York, and Sela, who lives also in New York City, were not. So apparently, where you live in the United States gives you different films on BFI.
Well, no, just to be specifically accurate, if you're in the U.S., you don't have access to BFI. It's region blocked. In other words, BFI gets rights to play films in different countries, and they currently don't have rights to show Caravaggio to U.S. audiences. So the reason, Eric, that you were able to see it on BFI is because you're using a VPN which hides your location. So BFI couldn't pick you up as living in the US, so they let you see it because it didn't know you were in the US. But I just visited the site normally, and so did Sela. And so it specifically looked to see what country we're in, and then it blocked us from seeing it as an option. So that's what was going on with BFI. And as for Canopy with a K, which is a library system, that is New York. That I couldn't access because I live in New York, and the New York Public Library System has opted out of Canopy because they considered its cost to be, quote, unsustainable. I actually looked it up. There was a New York Times article. As of 2019, the New York Public Library said, we're pulling out of Canopy. It just costs too much. And we'd rather put those funds towards books and ebooks and audiobooks. And so that really is region dependent. For Canopy, it depends on your whether your local library happens to be a subscriber to Canopy and the attendant costs to it. Um, what I ended up doing was I signed up for Metrograph, which is a New York-based streamer that's affiliated with a New York theater that plays classic films, and I'm sorry, Metrograph. It's $5 a month, and not only does it have Caravaggio, it also has Blue. And what's it? Do you guys remember the name of Jarman's first film?
Oh, the one all in Latin about Saint. Oh gosh, why am I?
Bastian, wasn't it?
No, it's yeah, Justine. Yeah, you are
Oh
correct.
no,
Thank you, Kathy.
that's not the one then.
Oh,
Oh,
Jubilee.
yeah,
No, it's not Jubilee
Ah,
either.
the Tempest.
he's no. Anyway, it's got I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the other one, but it starts with this wild dance with people in white and very large, um, um, kind of like representations of penises. Um, it's a very wild opening for the film. Anyway, it's got, if you're interested, Metrograph, I think is available to anybody. Um, I mean, it happens to be in New York, but I think it's available to anybody. So if you want to see more Jarman, that's a way to do it. I was surprised that it's not on Criterion, but I don't know. I don't,
Sebastian. My fault, Sebastian.
has any, I'll look it up. I'll look it up and I'll let you know. Um,
Yeah,
but
thank you.
but
Yes,
anyway,
the curiosity is killing me.
but anyway, so just for anyone who's interested in exploring more German, Metrograph is one way to do that. It just, for $5 you've got an entire month's access to the whole library, which includes 3 of Jarman's best movies. And I'll shut up and I'll do some research and I'll come back later.
I'd also like to point out, real quick, Kathy, before you go, I'd also want to point out that you can watch his more avant-garde films that he used using the Super 8 technique and the video deck editing, such as The Last of England, and which also features Tilda Swinton. And I think his best of the avant-garde films, I think this is obviously his best film overall, but the best of his avant-garde films, his version of War Requiem, in which he not only reunited the main cast of this film, so Tilda Swinton, Sean Bean, whose name should either be Sean Bond or Sean Bean. I don't understand how he's allowed to have both names, but that's neither here nor there. And he also got Laurence Olivier out of retirement, and it's Laurence Olivier's last appearance on film, and both of those are available on YouTube. Go ahead, Kathy.
the good call on War Requiem. That's beautiful. I was just going to say, I have a BFI subscription over here, and if you have a VPN, and if I can help anybody with signing in on my account, just leave me a message. If that would work. I don't know if it would, but if it would work, then I'm more than happy to share that subscription.
I'll be editing that out. Sela and I did have a workaround that I won't mention, and so if this ever comes up again, we have solved the issue, and it worked pretty well, didn't it, Sela?
Yes, it did.
So we'll be.
And Eric, it is Sebastian. You're right.
Oh no! When you described the opening scene, I was like, that has to be Sebastian. Yes. Which not my cup of tea. Not Jarman at his best. I didn't think Jubilee was all that very good a movie. I think the punk rockers didn't make very good actors in that film, quite honestly. But I do think we need, and I'm not exactly the biggest fan of his version of The Tempest either. But I think we need to allow artists to grow. And one of the nice things about the fact that he was an avant-garde filmmaker is he was able to make his mistakes at a very low budget level, and kind of work them out of his system. But one of the interesting points, and I'm going to turn to Yazzie on this because this is something that she made a point of in our original recording, is it took Jarman 7 years. Plus, of course, D'Amico did 3 rewrites to produce the screenplay, because he was constantly reworking and constantly reworking. And yeah, so you had an interesting story from Tilda Swinton about that, didn't you? Yeah, Yazzie seems to be in the Matrix, but Tilda Swinton in the documentary Derek, which she also does the voiceover, talks about how Derek Jarman would come out of each rewrite of the script a completely different person, and talked about the transformation that and the toll that taking on this kind of dream project had on him. And she suggests that the reason why he moved away from feature films and exclusively to these, with the exception of Edward II, which he was hired by Channel 4 to do these very, very experimental films like The Garden, and and Blue, which is probably the most experimental film in his entire oeuvre, was simply that it just took too much out of him to create a film like this. And especially, of course, while fighting HIV/AIDS, it was too much trouble to deal with producers and distribution and and rewrite after rewrite after rewrite, and he was able to create a more improvisational style. But what those films do allow you to do that a feature film doesn't is because he is pretty much shooting on the fly. That is to say, he has an idea, grabs his Super 8 camera, gets whatever people he can together, shoots that scene, and then edits it on the video deck right away. You really get the sense of an artist, and you really get to see the artist at work. But what you don't get is narrative, and what you don't get is anything to tie you to the film other than the pure artist talent. And of course, to me, that is the trade-off that you pay with avant-garde films, as well as Hai pointed out, the fact that a lot of avant-garde work in any medium, whether it's theater, film, painting, music, is terrible. And for me to have discovered a Derek Jarman came from pure luck. And the reason why was because he was hired to do music videos in the 1980s for the bands that were most popular. Most famously, of course, the Pet Shop Boys, where where they wanted to do rear projections for their tour, and he was actually put in charge of designing their entire tour. But and this name comes up so many times, but Morrissey and the Smiths, of course, and he became most famous for shooting their videos for the Queen is Dead album. And so I didn't have to encounter a Derek Jarman by going through and watching hundreds and hundreds of hours of very, very bad avant-garde, because he got discovered by these pop artists who were producing tunes that had a nice beat, and 14-year-old me could dance to.
I just jump in with a quick data point. I believe Jarman said that he rewrote the script for Caravaggio 17 times.
Oh, did I say 7?
I don't think you said. You're talking about rewrites with other people, but I'm not sure you mentioned that the overall total was 17.
Oh, I was reading off my notes. I was thinking maybe I did drop the one in front of it, but because I know, contrary to popular belief, I actually do make notes for these episodes. I know it's weird. It just doesn't. How do I make it sound like I'm rambling? That's the mystery. Yazzie, is your microphone working yet? Uh,
Oh, that's terrible. The reason we did
the
this in the
whole
first
reason we don't, well, the
was because
curse,
Ozzy was having audio difficulties in the original episode.
the curse of Caravaggio continues. Well, I'm going to start drawing this room to a close because we are actually approaching that magic moment that High always ribs me about, where we're getting as long as the film itself. And I'm gonna we're gonna go in PTR order this time, and we're gonna start with Hydebender and just your final thoughts on Caravaggio, and then we'll come back with the programming notes for next week.
I just I want to express appreciation for you continuing to pick films that, at least on my end, challenge me. Um, and I think that's one of the pleasures of this room is that you watch. Some films are just a total super enjoyable ride. Next week's movie, The Eagle Has Landed, is one of the the most enjoyable films I think you can ever watch, especially within the war genre, World War II genre. Um, it's just pure pleasure, and it doesn't require. Um, it's just a wonderful ride, and I think it's also a really great work of art. So, but this movie requires more effort, and it I think I think it broadens us to see all kinds of movies, and um, I hope that you forgive IMDb for its rating and come back to IMDb. Um, but different people are going to have different reactions, and I think the main thing for us is to try to encompass as many perspectives as we can, to try to be as big as we can as people and as artists and as people who experience art, um, and to try to just appreciate every art uh, object for what we can get from it. So I appreciate you selecting this twice, and I'm looking forward to the different rides you're going to take us on over the coming weeks and months.
Thank you, High, and looking forward to your reflections next week on The Eagle Has Landed. Sila, your final thoughts on Caravaggio.
Well, first of all, thank you to everyone for being here and for discussing and bringing your perspectives about it. And of course, Eric, for choosing and repeating, in this case, this particular film. I get a chance to reflect again. Um, I wanted to touch on one point that has been done from different angles, and that is the polarity or the combination of contrast. Um, has been mentioned before, so I'm not going to make a list out of it. But I I picked up a very short dialogue that interests me a lot towards the beginning, um, because I think um, in this contrast, Jarman as well as Caravaggio both are seem to be trying to combine. In other words, the term reality, which I think Eric spoke about before, this term of reality is in a way shown in terms of combining what is, which is why we have seen the calculator and we see several individuals smoking cigarettes, which I think did not exist in the 1500s or 1600s. Um, the short dialogue is the Cardinal and Caravaggio when he's um, looking at this painting. The Cardinal says, "Why is the skin so green?" And Caravaggio responds, "I have been sick for weeks." And the Cardinal says, "What about art?" And Caravaggio says, "This is not art." So I truly love that because there's a there's a school of thought that refers to the artist, the true artist, as that artist that is a vessel and is being a catalyst for whatever is coming through that person to be able to put either on a pentagram or on a canvas or a sculptor or a filmmaker or a writer, that the art is not coming from the person, it's coming from something beyond the person. In other words, it's not really art, it's just an expression that in our cultures we seem to be calling it art for quite a few centuries. And in terms of this vessel, I would say even that Tilda Swinton, in a way, is an example of this, because as an inexperienced person, being that her first film, I don't see her giving any performance of a mature actress, of a um, enlightened actress. She's just doing what she is, and I think for myself, I see that is the same Tilda Swinton that I see in the last couple of decades in a mature artist, but nevertheless the same person, the same type of acting, the same weirdness, the same way she's simple in Caravaggio, she's simple 20 years ago. So this person, with or without experience, is being herself in that particular role and portraying that role the way she can only do it. So that's for me a manifestation of the importance of being who you are instead of trying to make art. And whichever material comes out of what you're doing, calling it art or not, um, I find that extremely important. And I simply liked very much the fact that he, in that particular scene, he said, "This, what I'm doing, this intensity, this, everything I'm doing for 30 years, um, when you look at his whole life, everything I'm doing is not art. That's just life."
Thank you. So beautifully said. Yazzie, is your microphone working? Okay, we'll move on. Kathy, your final thoughts on Caravaggio.
Um, that's an interesting point that Sina made, and it made me think of something that you said earlier, Eric, about the bad acting in Jubilee. Let's face it, it's pretty bad. But it is about being yourself, and Jarman was, whilst he respected the craft, he was also a true artist in that he respects the craft, and he lets artistic people be themselves. Um, and it's very gratifying to hear a conversation about Jarman. It's I'm a semi fan, I suppose. He looms large in British gay history and in art, and it's delightful to hear him spoken about. And I would just like to echo as well Hai's comments. This is the most welcoming room. I am not of. I am in awe of you guys, and you never make me feel stupid or ridiculous or um, anything in this room. It's always welcoming, and you respect people's views. And I think, given the standard of this room, that's tremendous. I genuinely think this is what Clubhouse was made for. So thank you very much.
And we love having you, Kathy. I would like to point out that we were able to have a 90-minute conversation about a Derek Jarman film and barely talk about queerness, AIDS, and the London underground scene and or any of the other things that if you Google Jarman's name are going to pop up. And we were able to talk mostly about him as an artist, not about an artist who had a disease, not about an artist who had a sexual preference during a time period when it was less than socially accepted. We were talking just about him as an artist, and we were able to talk about his work as a whole and this film as a whole without having to put it into that kind of a spectrum. And I don't think that speaks to anything that we did. I think that speaks to the life that Jarman led and the works of art that he created, that he is not the queer director, and he is not the director who died of AIDS, and he is not the director who bought a house underneath a nuclear power plant, which he is, but he is an avant-garde director whose technical and visual innovations have changed films today. Who happen to have been at home the person who lived that life, and I think that also speaks to Yazzy's point about maybe what Jarman saw in Caravaggio and why he created the film the way that he did. So yes, as I mentioned, next week. Oh, go ahead.
Let me just add this. Maybe probably my favorite bit from the film, when that person high in the church says, if a picture is good, you can have my nephew. Revolutionary gestures in art are a help to us. Bet you didn't think about that, you little bugger. Keeps the quo in the status. So I thought that was just brilliant. So I just wanted to fit that in before we stop talking about the movie. That's my favorite bit of dialogue in the movie.
Yeah, thanks. That was the Pope himself who says that. Yes, yes. So I mentioned that next week we are celebrating the 80th anniversary of D-Day, or Operation Overlord, with my favorite World War II movie, The Eagle Has Landed, from 1976, which stars, among others, Donald Sutherland, Robert Duvall, and the great Michael Caine. I went through my favorite World War II movies and just chose that. I didn't reflect on whether it had anything to do with Operation Overlord. Now, if you're like me and you're sitting around your Operation Overlord tree, every June 6th and listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk while watching the Dam Busters, by 5 o'clock you've already opened up your Operation Overlord gifts and have taken down the Overlord stockings. And of course, in my family, we have a tradition that on June 5th, on the eve, you get to open your big gift. So you should be freed up by 5 p.m. For that, but be prepared. I'm a bit of a World War II buff, so extra nerd alert for that one. And then, because we're going to start the month, I'm just going to go through June's schedule. We'll next move to The Hound of the Baskervilles from 1959, starring Peter Cushing. And this was the Hammer Horror or Hammer Studios version of the Sherlock Holmes story. This was to replace a film called The 7% Solution that was Yazzy's suggestion, which we will do as soon as someone can find it anywhere on streaming. So we're at work on that. We're then going to have A Taste of Honey as part of our kitchen sink drama, directed by Tony Richardson, and based on the Sheila Delaney play. That's we always try to have one of those a month, and then we end with A Night to Remember, which is of course the recreation of the sinking of the Titanic with Kenneth Moore, and that is our audience suggestion this time from the other Kathy. The musician Kathy, who also happens to be from Blighty, and that's our month schedule. Other than that, I do want to point out that I do put some thought into not having too much of the Shakespeare, not too much of the Caravaggios, and try to balance the schedule. But I am also open to criticism. So if you feel like I'm getting too heavy into, like maybe one of the things that I heard was that maybe having 2 Shakespeare films within a 3-week period was a little bit much. Feel free to tell me and I will adjust it. Other than that, I'm going to be closing the room unless anybody's got anything else in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Have a great night, everybody, and we'll see you next week for The Eagle Has Landed. Want to join the conversation? Follow the link in the episode description. Every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you can be a part of one of our recordings. You'll also see the films that we have scheduled for the next couple of months. And while you're listening, take a minute to subscribe to the podcast and give us a rating and write a review for us either on Spotify or Apple Podcast. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you for listening to UK Cinema History.